Welcome to the PharmaSource podcast.
Today we're joined by Peter DeYoung, CEO of Piramal Global Pharma at Piramal Pharma Limited. Peter oversees a diversified portfolio spanning Piramal Pharma Solutions, its integrated CDMO business, and Piramal Critical Care, a leading player in complex hospital generics, including inhaled anaesthetics. So Piramal Pharma Limited has built a unique position in the pharmaceutical landscape with 17 global development and manufacturing facilities serving over 100 countries, combining contract services with proprietary products across hospital generics and consumer healthcare. With backing from Carlyle Group's 2020 strategic investment, they're executing an ambitious growth strategy across multiple high-value segments. So in this strategy teardown, we'll explore how Piramal's diversified model creates advantages in CDMO services, its approach to complex manufacturing, and where Peter sees the biggest opportunities in external manufacturing partnerships. So thank you for joining me, Peter. Should we just kick off with a bit about your background? Could tell me your journey to becoming CEO of Piramal?
Great. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here on the podcast with you here today, and nice to see you here at CPHI. From a background, I'm originally from the U.S., born in Wisconsin, grew up in Chicago. I'm an engineer by training. However, in my career-wise, I've worked in pharma my whole career across consulting, investing, and operating roles in the U.S., Switzerland, and India. I've been in India now 16 years and actually worked across consulting, investing, and operating roles. I've been in the Piramal Group now 13 years in a variety of roles. I'm currently in the current role since 2019, where I've been leading both critical care and pharma solutions.
Great. And for those less familiar, what's the Piramal Pharma Limited story in a nutshell? You have this sort of unique model spanning CDMO services, complex hospital generics, and consumer healthcare. How do these separate offerings fit together?
So Piramal Pharma Limited is a publicly traded company headquartered in India. We have about $1 billion in sales last year. We run on a fiscal year ending in March. We have 3 divisions. Our largest division is our CDMO, as you described. So that's doing contract development and manufacturing services for innovators and generic players and mid-sized companies. The second business is about 30% of our sales, and that's critical care. That's our complex hospital generics business. And then our third division is about 10%. It's our consumer health division, which covers the domestic consumer products for India. And we see a lot of benefits to having these 3 components together because they are not all correlated in how they do well or do poorly. And so we see a lot of synergies because obviously the industries can go through ups and downs. And by being together, we can have a lot of benefits to make sure we make the right decisions to succeed in the short, medium, and long term, which may not be possible if we only had one of these divisions. And also we do see a lot of benefits also with talent and with capital allocation to have 3 areas to focus on instead of one, which allows us to make the right choices when we have opportunities.
It does seem quite distinctive in the market. Does that kind of breadth create challenges?
We see more opportunities than challenges. You know, if you think back to some of the history, there were certain points in time where generics were very attractive, and therefore inorganic growth was very difficult because the prices of product additions were very challenging. But then there are other periods of time where the product additions were more modest than what it would take to acquire or add. And then because we took the right longer term horizon, we could wait for the right time to add products to our portfolio. So there's a period in our history where we added 2 full sets of products, both one from Janssen, one from Mallinckrodt, at a point in time where the acquisition multiples were much more attractive. And so by waiting for the right time and having the longer time horizon, you can do well. Also, just as an example, there was a period in time where hospitals were shut because of COVID, and we were selling inhalation anesthetics. Now, we couldn't sell as many because the hospitals weren't operating, but at that time, our CDMO services were running very strong. And so we were able to weather that volatility because we had the portfolio approach, and you can make the right decisions for the short and medium and long term because we had the multiple avenues of that. And if we only had one of those 2, we may not have been able to make the choices we made that we did, which created more value for the stakeholders over the long run. And then finally, having a domestic business as a new headquartered company gives us a fully independent growth path that allows us to have a lot of, they won't be correlated downsides. And so that really does help us with stability.
I see, yeah, they kind of hold each other up in a way. Yeah. For the sake of this podcast and its audience, let's focus on your CDMO business. How do you compete for mindshare as pharma companies reassess their manufacturing footprints?
We think we have a number of advantages, but just to recap for the audience as to what we focus on, we are an integrated CDMO. We have offerings to follow the molecule from discovery to off-patent commercial. so the full life cycle of the drug. Also from the service offering perspective, we have small molecule and also ADCs, and you can do drug substance and drug product. So we really can provide if you will, the full package to clients. And I think you would ask, okay, you meet a lot of CDMOs who may say these sorts of things. One of the areas that we think that we're particularly strong in is our global network. And in particular, we have sites in India and in sites in UK, US, and Canada. And so in today's world, being able to offer to a client saying, which geographic preferences do you have and which combination of assets will best meet your needs, as opposed to saying, I have something in the US or I have something in India, I hope you want it. And we were just having discussions with clients. I'm just giving you an example today or this week in person at CPHI, where they're saying they're working through the question of how do I de-risk from China, but how much do they want to spend? What are their options? How do they get control of the supply chain? And for example, we can do RSM, KSM, intermediate, API, drug product, and we can let them put the pieces on the map and choose, okay, I want this here, I want this there. I need the value of proximity question answered in a particular way. There are very few CDMOs who can do that without China. And so we think we're one of the very small number of CDMOs that can help people put those pieces together in a way that meets their geographic risk preference.
How do you approach those conversations with clients, helping them de-risk their portfolio? Do you have all of your capabilities across all the global footprints, or do you kind of specialize in each area?
Some of both.
Yeah.
It starts off with the client problem. So the client will come with a problem, otherwise it's very hard to have a conversation.
Okay.
So they'll typically have an entry point where they're trying to work through something. So an example would be their board has asked them to relook at their geographic alignment, or they're at phase 3 and they want to prepare for that registration validation and they want another source, or their current CDMO is causing some issue and they need to have an alternative because something's just not working for whatever reason. So there's usually a reason why they're talking to us. We start with that, and then we ask them, what's going on? What is your real problem? And then when that conversation gets started, we then ask open-ended questions around, well, what about this, or have you thought about that? And because they typically come in with a very narrow focus, I want to solve this thing. But if we have the right discussion and we help them understand the possibilities, we very often see either at the beginning or later that they very much look at what else they can do. And so it doesn't always start with the first win, but it may happen later or altogether. But just an example of how this comes to play, we have 9 of our top 20 customers work with at least one site in India and one site in the West. And so they're using us for our combination of assets, not as a single provider.
Yeah.
And more than 15 of our top 20 customers work in at least 2 sites. So our most important customers who contribute the most to our revenue and the most to our growth are the ones who see us as not just a single item provider, who see us as a solution partner. And we have these discussions, and we really try and work with the customer to say, I know you have an RFP process, we'll honor that, but have you thought about how you want to handle this? And then we can start to discuss a set of options that very few of the other CDMOs can have, because we have a different set of assets.
It really does sound like you're a jack of all trades in a way, but how is your business set up so that you ensure you do have that technical expertise, the kind of balance of breadth and depth?
So we don't want to be in an area unless we think we can be best in class in that area. And so we do want to make sure that people could choose us. In the end, they're only going to choose us for a capability if we're good in that capability. So we can offer the wider set of tools, but each capability stands on its own, and we have people who buy those for those individual strengths. So just a couple of elements to this. The first is a lot of our things we've been doing for a long time. So an example would be we have things we call differentiated offerings. These are offerings that we think that we have long track record of success. For example, we've been doing ADCs for 20 years. A lot of people have entered ADCs 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. We've been doing conjugation for 20 years. So we have a long history there. And that's an example of a differentiated offering where we can do the conjugation, we can do the fill finish, we can do the linker payload, we can do the MAD. In each situation, we chose a location to offer that service where we have track record. So we aren't saying we just built up a bunch of shiny new buildings where we hope people can look at the location and say it looks nice. We actually have a long track record with a deep bench. We've been doing these services for a long time. So I gave ADCs as an example, or bioconjugation, and those are the 4 offerings, but we also have high potent API, where we developed the strength there for, again, multiple decades, or containment-oriented fill finish. Also, we've been doing that for decades, both in the US. And then another sweet spot that we've really developed the strength in is late clinical and early commercial launch. So we've seen a lot of clients coming to us post-POC They've had that great clinical result. They've been working with a CDMO for a certain period of time to get them that far, but they're a bit nervous. They want to add a second CDMO because they're a bit nervous about what happens when the volume goes the way they want, and are they really going to be getting the help they need for that registration validation and all those difficult regulatory requirements. We've done this. We've got 30 active phase 3s right now. So we have a deep team who can do this. And so we think that we can add a lot of heft to this. And the last bit is that a few years ago, we added what we call the Science Collective. So we have people at our sites who deliver excellent surveys, but we realize that our clients need to get someone above our sites who are experts scientifically, who can sit next to them and work with them as they encounter problems at the sites. So we have PhDs who are leaders in their field, in their specific areas, who sit above the site and partner with our clients to address questions either at the scoping phase when we're deciding what to do with them, asking the tough questions about what about this, or have you thought about that? I know you asked for this, but maybe you should have asked for that, or have you thought about the implications of what you want? Or when we run into issues along the way that happen because of the unknown science as you scale up and encounter previously unexpected challenges. So we think the Science Collective, and we have experts in all the different areas we operate in, are really a good value add to help our clients partner together and help them work through those science challenges. So we think we have a lot of depth in the areas we operate in the different differentiated areas I described.
So with that example of ADCs having that history compared to a lot of competitors which are very new, what do you think is the kind of biggest advantage in that? Would you say it's your talent or kind of established processes, or where really is that advantage?
So a lot of people are excited about bioconjugation. There's a lot of ways you can do bioconjugation. There's a lot of new technologies. Not everyone's trying to do the same bioconjugation. And so if you actually look at it, there's many things one could conjugate, many ways in which you could conjugate. And a lot of times people are trying to push the envelope to add some angle because ADCs are now becoming a more crowded space for the innovator. So they're trying to find their own edge. So there's a lot of platform technologies, a lot of new ideas people are trying to explore. And so our point is if it can be conjugated, we can conjugate it. And our evidence for that is the hundreds of clinical batches we've done and hundreds of commercial batches we've done. So we can do that early clinical conjugation all the way up to the commercial launch and successfully afterwards. And so our point is that pretty much every technology that one could conjugate, we've done already. And whenever a new one comes, people come to us with their tough challenges. And so we think we have a deep bench in this area. And we think that when clients test us out, they usually pick us after the trial if they're trying to work through that choice. And I think we just announced an example today, actually breaking news. We have an arrangement with one of our clients who developed their own platform technology. It's Intercell. And what they did is they realized that they want to license their technology to other innovators. And they want to make sure the innovators are clear that if it were to be succeed, they could have a CDMO that could make it. And so they picked us as one of their options for that. And so then we're obviously doing work for them, which is why they could make this choice. And then now they want to license that technology to other players and say, okay, here's a safe CDMO to use. And so it's an example of, we have many private ones we can't talk about, but that's an example of a public one of which we have many other technology we also do.
Where are you seeing the strongest demand in your CDMO business right now? Is it like a specific modality like ADCs, for example, or therapeutic area, or types of manufacturing services?
There's a lot of exciting demand right now. I'll try and break it into a few categories. So I'd say the bioconjugation ADCs are very exciting right now. There's obviously a lot of interest in the space. A lot of innovators are really seeing this as an attractive area. We really saw the kind of the inflection point being that the Pfizer deal a few years ago, when that landmark deal happened, I think the whole industry noticed, and then it became and it's only been really an increase after that. And so we see a lot of interest in bioconjugation ADCs, and in particular, it used to be oncology only. We're seeing a lot of other therapeutic areas. And so that's really broadening the scope and the reach of ADCs or bioconjugation. So I think that would be one area of intense interest. I think another area that's quite attractive right now is obviously with all that's going on in True Social. We're seeing a lot of interest in onshore offerings. And so we've had a massive uptick in inquiries and RFPs, which are a leading indicator to decisions. It's not decisions, but particularly for drug product and drug substance. So we have 3 sites that have those offerings. So we're seeing quite a swell of inquiries for our Lexington site, which does sterile fill finish and bioreactor expansion there, which we can cover later if you want. And then the second area is our Sellersville site, which is solid oral dose and liquid cream ointment. And so that means also seeing a lot of proposals because people read those postings, and obviously it's not enforced yet, but the question is, it kind of implies you need to have drug product in the US for the US. And so with that, they're seeing a lot of people want to make sure they have that base covered, because not everyone would be big enough to have made their own domestic investment. So maybe the big players may have it, but then what about everyone else? And there's a lot of demand in that everyone else category. And also drug substance, some people just want to have the value there, and so that's where our Michigan site's really well positioned. So that's probably the second plank. We also have peptides, which is getting a lot of interest. We have that offering. And I'd also mention that we are still seeing a lot of demand for our Indian sites, because if you think about, there's another concern, which is the whole question about what about China? And for people who want to have a non-China option, for people whose boards are saying, what about the supply chain security? Even if they're licensing from China the innovation, they still want to have a non-China option for the delivery for the ex-China markets, a lot of players. And so not always does the math work to put it in the US. And so then where do you go? And that's where we're seeing a lot of demand for our India sites across drug substance and drug product, where no matter what the tariff is, the math doesn't compute and you need an Asian option. And in that scenario, we're seeing quite a bit of demand there. So it's a bit of a long answer, but we're actually seeing pretty broad-based interest and demand. And I think that's also related to a bit of a sentiment shift, which if you look, it's a bit of a long answer, but I just want to complete the thought, which is the funding environment has been challenging probably since January until maybe June for our clients. And that being said, we've seen a modest uptick in July, August, September, and October. Recent IPOs happened after a long break in the US. Some big deals happened in the US on the M&A side, which cycles money. And so clients are a little bit cautiously optimistic that there may be a bit of a sentiment shift, which we think should lead to a decision change.
Before I ask you about your US site and Lexicon, what do you think is the reason for that uptick in the last few months?
I think there are many people who are much more expert in this than me, but I would say that the arrangement that Pfizer and then others made with the Trump administration on most favored nation pricing, I think removed a bit of a cloud about the unknown unknowns on where this could go. And when people saw where that landed, I think that did a bit of a sentiment change for the entire sector. And you look at, let's say, the public markets after the first Pfizer arrangement occurred, and then the subsequent ones happened, so they're not the only one, and there's multiple arrangements that have happened. It kind of gave a direction of travel that narrowed the range of outcomes so that investors felt that they could then start to think a bit different. Now, anything can change tomorrow. We can wake up and there could be a new world, and we have to live in a volatile scenario and accept, and we are in that setup. But I think at least the investor community, perhaps that may have been one of the things that affected that.
So let's talk about the manufacturing state in the US then. So obviously you have an established manufacturing site there already. Have you been changing your manufacturing strategy or increasing different modalities, or how have you been navigating these changes and this kind of volatility to continue to help your clients?
So when we make decisions on where to allocate capital, we really involve our customers deeply in this. So we have a customer advisory board, which we meet with our top customers once a year for 2 days in person at one of our sites. And we involve our customers in a discussion with what are their priorities. We bring in external panelists, and we also share our strategy and direction and get their input into that. And we also obviously look at market research, and we look at our current customer placements and where their pipelines would go if they were to proceed the way they hope and expect, and what they would need for demand and capacity. So based on those sort of different input, and obviously the financial analysis, you then look where we want to go. And one of the top areas of need was identified for us was US-based sterile fill finish for kind of a modest commercial size and a containment-oriented high-potent setup. And if you look at the US market structure, despite lots of construction for injectable capacity, the entire GLP craze has soaked up a lot of capacity onshore US. And then the M&A takeout of Catalent removed a major player from the segment. And also you look at a lot of the drugs are going in the injectable format, and there aren't enough onshore providers before any of the current administration decisions. And so actually our decision to go ahead with this was based on the macro demand factors and our customers who are already at our site who need us to grow for them to grow. And based on that, we decided to add an additional commercial line and 2 industrial-sized lyos, which allow us to handle the mix, because we had a little bit more of a liquid format because we had a limited lyo capacity. We're now adding 2 much larger lyos and an additional filling line, which can more than double what we can do. And so this is really linked to those macro choices that we're seeing. And the additional benefit is if all the ADCs we do can finish in the US here, and a lot of our clients want the DP in the US, regardless of the prior steps, because they want the final step in the US. And so that was what drove that investment decision in Lexington. Also, back to the ADCs again, in Michigan, we have our high-potent facility. This facility's been doing high-potent API for decades. The new interest is, particularly after the increasing biotech focus on ADCs, people are looking for onshore linker payload options. And so we added a couple of years ago a small suite doing this, but it sold out within months. And so then we needed to do another one of those expansions. And so in that we did a combined expansion, $90 million expansion for both Lexington and Riverview, covering the line expansion I just covered in Lexington, but also an additional dedicated linker payload suite in Michigan. And so this is, again, it's back to we have a deep team that have been high-potent API for a long time. They've been in linker payload for a while also, and we needed the capacity because we just simply were sold out. So those are 2 expansions we did. And just to round out the equation, we have Sellersville, Pennsylvania. This is a legacy Teva site actually from way back when, and it's got significant capacity available. We acquired it because we thought that post-COVID and now post-biosecure or other China de-risking, people would want a U.S. option, and so we have significant U.S. onshore capacity available for API at Michigan, for drug product Sellersville, so for solid oral liquid cream, and for sterile finish in Lexington. So we think that no matter what macro happens with the US, there will be a general bias towards onshore. And for anyone who wants that, we have all the major categories in our view.
It's really interesting what you said about your customer advisory board and getting kind of that feedback. How else do you keep up with the market and how do you predict what's going to happen in the future so that you can be future-proofed?
Well, you have to be out in the market talking to customers. So yeah. I think the first thing is to make sure, so we don't really have much of a corporate headquarters. Our joke is that particularly our sales team, that there's only 2 places you can really be, is at the customer or at the factory. We don't have a sales office, and so we really want our people to be out in the market or at our locations when customers are visiting us. And just as an example, we probably have a customer at one of our sites every day sometime. So which helps us with our quality, by the way. There's always a customer at one of our sites. That being said, so speaking with customers and very specifically not selling to customers, but understanding what they're thinking about, what their problems are, helps us understand where they're going. We think the customer advisory board is a unique offering. We talk about it a lot so other people may start to do it, but overall we find this very useful because it's those 2 days that the customers are with us, they're only helping us. And they choose to invest in us because they want us to help them. And so allocating 2 days of your life just to this means that you're seeing value in the relationship and you're seeing value in that. And so that's a really deep relationship that helps us get a lot. And obviously when we do all the market research and you have strategy people from consulting firms who help us out, and we read a lot and go to customer forums and conferences and so forth. So.
That's really great to hear. Let's move topics a little bit. So you've got 17 facilities globally. Digitization must be a big opportunity, but also kind of quite a complex challenge for such a large business like your own. Tell me a bit about digitization then. Where does it rank in your priorities right now? What capabilities are you building to stay competitive as a CDMO?
First thing is that we work with innovators who have IP as being a very important concern. And when your data is on paper, it's very hard for it to be stolen. When your data is on the cloud or in a computer, it's very easy for it to be stolen if you don't have the right protections. So the first thing is that we have a very aggressive and systematic and robust data security approach to prevent cyber attacks from going the wrong way. Because once you go digital, you have to make sure you have the right protections. So we spent quite a bit of money on the basics, which is if we have the data electronically, it should stay inside the perimeter. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we are in the process of going through an ERP upgrade. We're going from SAP to SAP S/4HANA. So that'll be a much more, our last SAP implementation was 20 years ago. And so now we're going to the modern platform. It's a current multi-phase project. Our first go lives will be going up end of March, early April. And we're doing it in a phased manner. But the overall approach is to get a future-ready ERP system, which will be the backbone of everything we do. The next area is to look at a lot of quality systems. They were semi-automated. We're moving to a largely fully digital approach in steps, so that most of our quality documentation will be online. And we think that is where a lot of the interesting data resides and can allow a lot of the more modern AI approaches. And then we're obviously looking at, and in the process of things such as MES and other ways to allow most of our critical process parameters to be digital instead of on paper. And so we call it a war on paper. We want to make sure that our end state should be that there isn't really going to be much paper at our facilities. And as these different bits go online, you have a big effort on using data analytics or the Gen AI or other tools to try and figure out how we can add value to certain processes. And I'd say we're taking modest steps in that direction, but we have to be careful with it's GMP, and we have to do things in a way that's appropriate. And we have to keep sure we keep the data inside the walled garden, not out in the cloud, for particularly some of the internal data. So we're working hard on those areas, but it's a big area, a big focus. And our clients told us at our recent client advisory board that they're interested in it and they're okay with us going in that direction, which wasn't the case maybe 2 years ago. So the clients are fully on board with us moving this quickly with the right safeguards and protections, and we're all in.
So how do you actually measure success in the CDMO space as a business? Time to market, right first time manufacturing, client retention. What kind of performance benchmarks do you put yourself at?
So we have certain things that we call license to operate, which is we say if we don't do this right, we don't really have the right to be in the business. I would say the first thing would be on safety and environment, EHS. So we have a zero harm goal, and our whole point is that we can't really talk about our outcomes if people can't go home safe every day. And so our whole approach is that we have that zero harm goal, and we want to make sure that our employees are safe, because as an employer, this is our number one requirement, is that has to be met. Second thing is you think about from a patient perspective, quality is also in our view table stakes. It's a license to operate, if you use that phrase, where the bar should be that would you give it to yourself, your kid, your parent, your cousin, someone you care deeply about. And so we need to be audit ready 24/7. FDA or MHRA or other editors can come at any point in time. And so we really need to be spotless on the regulatory quality standpoint, because people are trusting us with making something for them for the most important moments in their life. So I think those two are non-negotiable. When you look at the next area, we would say we call it delivery to the light. And so there's a lot of inputs. There's OTIF, there's schedule adherence, there's right first time, there's cost of quality, cost of poor quality. All those things go into the operational metrics, but the outcome of that would be customer delight. We don't say customer satisfaction. We don't say we met the objectives or delivering your promises. We want delight. So we actually have a training program for our facilities. We brought in an ex-Disney guide whose job is to think about how do we address the fundamental functional things that can make a customer happy, but also the emotional things that can leave them delighted. And our goal is delight. So now what would be a measure of this? Net Promoter Score is an example of a tool that's been around for decades. We didn't invent it. Some consulting firm invented it. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, but the score ranges from 100 to negative 100. And you ask customers, we have a survey, we have a team that surveys customers at regular intervals, how are you feeling with the project? And they give us a score, and then they give us a detailed report. And if they rate us a promoter, which means a 9 or a 10, we celebrate at the site. If they give us a passive or a detractor, we then have a facilitated discussion with them to find out beyond the survey, why are they not delighted? And what we really address that in a constructive way that works for everyone. So we listen, we respond, and then we try and improve that. And so I think our overall, we look at this, and just as one more bit of background, is another consulting firm did a survey, they do an annual survey actually, of all the CROs and CDMOs, and asked the pharma companies, how do you rate all of the players? And they do a stack rank, and the average CDMO has a negative Net Promoter Score. So as an industry, we are annoying our customers. We are frustrating our customers. The average customer is not happy with their CDMO service.
Wow.
And so now, just to give some credibility for our Net Promoter Score, we actually have a third party validate our scores once a year. So we have an independent group on our team do it, and then we have a third party validation of that. And so we did a lot of looking last year to see how do we make our improvements go up. And we've actually increased our net promoter scores by 15 points this year over last year. And it's a meaningful improvement, and 68 is our net promoter score for the first half of this year, which is 15 points up over last year. And just to remember, the benchmark is negative. So that's what we think, what that leads to is repeat business and referrals. And so this is an important indicator. And then when all that happens, which is we discussed all the license to operate and you delight the customers, then the top line is going to grow and then the profit's going to happen. And so when we talk to our employees, we talk in that order. We talk about license to operate, then we talk about delivering on promises, delighting customers, and then selling new work. And when that set of things occurs, then we get the overall goal of growing our top line and improving our profits.
That is really, really interesting, and something at PharmaSource and our events, CDMO Live, really being focused on CDMOs is aiming to kind of improve that relationship. Wrapping up then, looking ahead the next 5 to 10 years, where do you see the biggest opportunities for Piramal, and what investments are you planning to make to capture those?
So overall, we share with our investors. We're publicly traded, so we do have to share our plans from time to time. And so we had an investor day recently where we laid out our plan for 2030. And so we simple phrasing, we described the 3-2-1. We'd like to triple our EBITDA, double our revenue, and bring our debt EBITDA ratio down to 1. So we call it the 3-2-1 strategy. That's the quantitative. But overall, we want to double and that's for the Piramal Pharma overall. Within that, we'd like to double our CDMO business also. And so if you look at kind of what we want to accomplish in that, that's going to require us to think about some of the words we mentioned earlier. We want to increase our percent of innovative work. Right now, 54% of what we sell would be for on-patent innovators. It used to be 0, it's gone up to 54. We'd like to have that continue to increase. The other one is a lot of focus on integrated projects. We want to really continue to try to be more than just a vendor. We want to be a solution provider, so that integrated project focus, we want that to continue to go up. Then we discussed some of our differentiated project offerings. We covered things like the bioconjugation, the sterile fill finish. We have a categorization of differentiated offerings. We want that to increase, and that has been increasing a lot. And that, back to the investment question, our differentiated offerings are getting a lot of our investment. And then I'd say the other ones, we want to go deeper with our current customers, which is back to that point where I mentioned, the 15 of our top 20 or the 9 of our top 20 are looking with 2 sites, either in any country or in East and West. So we want to go deep with our most important customers and grow with them together as partners. When those things happen, along with the last bit, science. So I mentioned our science collective. As we want to do more innovative work, we want to become more strategically relevant. We have to really up the level of science we can contribute to our clients. And all those inputs will allow us, we think, to have the intrinsic elements to achieve that doubling. And obviously investment's going to happen. And so we've laid out our investment plan. It'll be a substantial hundreds of millions of dollars over the 5-year period to allow us to achieve that. And it's usually related to when we see that customer interest at a site, that we get to that point where we see the projections, we're going to hit that capacity level we need to add. We're going to expect to significantly enhance the capacity across many of our sites in our network over this 5-year period.
Thank you, Peter, for your time today. It's been great to talk to you.